Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We're having an abbreviated show today. Is today the holiday, Peter?
Today is the holiday in Canada. It's Victoria Day, where we celebrate the Queen Victoria and all that she did for the Commonwealth, even though she never set foot in Canada.
Yeah, and all the kids that she had and grandchildren who caused World War I, so that we can celebrate that too. Because if you don't know, I'm a history major. Her grandson was Kaiser Wilhelm II. One of her granddaughters was married to Nicholas II of Russia. Her grandson was the King of England at the time of World War I, and it was basically a war of royals with a sort of family feud going on, and one little spark lit the powder keg, and there you go, millions of people died. So happy Victoria Day.
Happy Victoria Day. Next we'll do Mary Queen of Scots or something. I mean, it's
although I didn't see the movie, but they of course they redid, like every other movie now. They're redoing every other good movie. And there was a Mary Queen of Scots Elizabeth movie in the 70s that starred Vanessa Redgrave and Glenda Jackson, and they just did one with the girl from the girl was in she was gorgeous blonde Australian, I believe she is. I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, I saw like about 15 minutes of that, and it was not even close to being as good as the original. I mean, there's something with remakes and sequels. Very rarely do you see a remake of an older movie that is better or as good as the original. Did you ever see The Magnificent Seven? Now that was good. Denzel Washington is great. And Chris Pratt and Ethan Hawke. I mean, they put a good cast together. It was not the same as the Yul Brynner movie of the I think it was 60s or early 70s, but it was good. I mean, that I could get into. At least that was, there was something there. But
remakes are a funny thing, and I think if Hollywood runs sort of challenges with content and ideas. And there's probably some movies out there that are had great concepts, but need the ability of technology and what's available to Hollywood now. And I saw like the concept of remakes, and I put out on Twitter yesterday, and I said the one I'd love to see a remake of was the 70s classic Logan's Run.
Oh God.
I think that could be a beautiful update. Like, it could be amazing in terms of what it did, and just the way film, cinematography can work with technology. I think it'd be very cool, considering it's got sort of nihilistic idea to it.
Yeah, there were a couple beautiful looking women in that movie too.
Yes.
I've always butchered her name. It's Jenny. I think it's Agater or Agutter or something. It's she was gorgeous. And actually I saw her in some show like years ago, and she still looked great. And I think, wasn't Farrah Fawcett in Logan's Run?
I think so.
I'm pretty sure a young Farrah Fawcett was in Logan's Run. It was Michael York who was the main.
Yeah, Michael York, and he was in it. I'm looking it up right now. Yeah, Jenny Agutter, Farrah Fawcett, Michael York.
Folks, I can remember
Richard Jordan. Peter Ustinov was the old man. That's right.
Richard Jordan, yes.
Yeah. And everyone else sort of
blends in. Yeah,
it blends in.
Now, okay, I'll bring this up because, and I will say it. I will not say anything in terms of the storyline or what happened in the Game of Thrones finale, because somebody, I just said one thing, and so I'll never watch the show again, you son of a bitch. Like, okay, whatever. I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose, but if it was 24 hours after, it's on you. But in the lead up to the Game of Thrones finale yesterday on HBO, I think tripled their number of commercials for shows that were upcoming.
Yeah.
They were using the captive audience to, the new Westworld season, the Deadwood movie, and they came, one of their new shows. Do you remember the movie Watchmen? A few of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing a Watchmen series.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, I saw the movie and turned it off after about 25 minutes. It really didn't grab me. The Watchmen series has Don Johnson in it, so
Oh boy.
I don't know that. I'll watch it. I'll watch one episode and see. But sometimes sometimes the remakes of things, they can be good, and sometimes they can be like Magnum PI, the remake of Magnum PI, which I hope got canceled because it's an abomination to remake a show like that without a Tom Selleck character. They had some guy. The only thing he had similar to Tom Selleck was he was wearing a Detroit Tigers cap. Other than that, it was not Tom Selleck or not Thomas Magnum as you remember him.
Yeah.
Higgins was a girl. Come on. Okay, so the only thing I'll say about the Game of Thrones thing yesterday, I liked I thought it was okay. I thought it resolved most of the storylines in an acceptable way. I just saw, Peter, the reaction of the fans because I went on Twitter and I did hashtag Game of Thrones so I could follow the traffic and the reaction as things happen. And there was a certain event that happened about 15 minutes in, and it was like, oh, like it was just this reaction of like horror, and I'm like, calm down, it's a TV show.
You know what? So I'm not a Game of Thrones person, and I have a ton of respect. And I made a tweet after the last episode about the reaction going on, saying I'm not sure who's worse. The Game of Thrones fans who want rewrites and episodes reproduced, or Star Wars fans who want the same thing and are challenging, having all these crazy conspiracy theories that the rise of women in the Star Wars movie is corrupting masculinity. I mean, just absolute insane things. And because they're so disappointed. And, a friend of mine tweeted me back and she said, some of us have watched this because we were very invested due to the books. And I always forget that Game of Thrones is a series of books. So my latest pet peeve in the world of anything to do with television or film is character arc. That term needs to be fired into the sun, and people have to stop talking about it like they're Roger Ebert and some great cinematic mind. Because frankly, if you watch this series hoping for the nuances of a book to be reproduced, you watched it, you missed the point, because no one can reproduce what happens in a book. Read the book, enjoy the book. Don't spoil your joy of it by hoping it's reproduced in TV.
And the problem is that what the Benioff and Weiss, who are the two guys who did most of the writing, converting the George R.R. Martin books into screenplays, their job over the last 5 or 6 years, or the first 5 or 6 years, was to sort of narrow the story into something they could put on TV. The last 2 years, because Martin didn't finish and he's still writing, is that they had to get the guidance from Martin to give them like what the conclusion would be, and then they would have to fill gaps. So obviously people are not going to be as attached to what's going on because now they don't know what's going on, and now they can disagree. Whereas the book was the Bible.
Yeah.
And the book
was the Bible. And in any series where this is taken from a book or literature and stuff, if the production of the story has gone so far ahead of the book, you need to pull back. And it's like you're Maverick and Top Gun. You're hanging on too tight, guys. You're hanging on too tight. You got to let go.
Yeah.
And enjoy the books. Come back. And this is this instant gratification thing, right? Everyone needs stuff now. And you've produced the series, and if you have to go talk to the author and the creator and the mind behind it to figure out how you finish the TV series before the book, we're losing perspective here.
Yeah, and I mean, I know everybody harkened back to the show Lost, which I loved, and how the ending of Lost was terrible. It's probably because they didn't think Lost was going to last as long as it did. And they just did. And by the way, for Star Wars fans, Benioff and Weiss are doing the next trilogy. So, if you didn't like what happened in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that's right. With, and the next one after episode 9, right?
Right.
Yeah. So there we go. And then that's going to be in this one, and that's going to be a whole fresh boot of characters too. It's going to be a completely new setup. if I understand. So it'll be interesting to see how if they're forgiven.
Yeah, well, let's see if they incorporate dragons and a few other things into.
Yeah.
Okay, X said he'll be joining us in a minute, so we'll get the show started here. There was one other thing I wanted to bring up, but it's my old mind is slipping.
I just want to say I spent the weekend in the state of hockey, which is Minnesota, and my son was in a basketball tournament down there, ironically, but it had a really nice. I haven't been down to the United States since last summer, and had a very, very nice time visiting lots of great people and seeing some very interesting signs on front lawns in rural America as we played. I almost wish Canadians could be just as passionate. And then I read the signs like, nah, we're good here. But it was nice to be down there. It's always fun to go down to Minnesota and see what's going on down there. Great sports state and lots of activity. I had a really nice time.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, May 20th, 2019.
I'm Peter Tessier in beautiful, balmy, and fresh Winnipeg. Good to be home.
Somebody was requesting the balmy. And I'm Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, one conference final is over. The Boston Bruins are twiddling their thumbs, waiting for the beginning of the Stanley Cup final, which will start on the 27th of May, so 1 week from today. St. Louis, we'll talk about game 5 and talk about what's going to happen in game 6 in a minute. But if St. Louis wins, they would get a pretty decent rest because the game 6 will be tomorrow. They would have about 5 days before having to travel to Boston. I think maybe they have to get there a little early for media day, but they would get a few days rest, or even if they go 7, they get a few days rest. But let's start with that. The Blues with a dominant performance in San Jose, 5-0. They take the lead 3-2. Now, I was in and out on this game because after Tarasenko scored on the penalty shot, it was pretty much over with. And then I started to see the reports of, San Jose players dropping like flies. Donskoy got hurt. Hurdle was not on the bench for the third period. Carlson played only a few minutes in the second period. Peter. Yeah. This is the thing. It's like San Jose, I think, if healthy, was the team that was favored, and even with a player like Carlson at less than 100%, I thought they could still beat the Blues. If these players can't come back, St. Louis is going to win this series.
And again, I caught up on the game and some of the stories late last night when I got home because I was driving. San Jose, they're beat up and they're tired though. They're just tired. And I think one of the things we forget a little bit about San Jose is they're not a bunch of spring chickens on that team.
No.
The core of their team is older. And yes, they're great guys. And yes, you kind of want, Father Time to not come and eventually take Joe Thornton away from us. And there's a lot of people out there hoping Joe Thornton gets a stab at a Stanley Cup, particularly against Boston. I think if San Jose manages to pull this off, for them to come in and face a Boston team this wrecked, and a Boston, face them as this wrecked while Boston is healing up, energizing, and getting ready to go, we will see a display of violence by the Bruins unparalleled, because that's exactly what I would do against a team that banged up.
Right. I'd run Carlson every chance I'd get.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what St. Louis is doing. St. Louis in the first 2 or 3 games of this series, Patrick Maroon was running Carlson. And that's, he's hurt. He's not at 100%. You don't know what exactly it is. It might be a groin. It could be a hip, whatever. You hit him, and you keep hitting him. And now when the game was pretty much not in doubt, they shut him down to prevent him from hurting himself even more. He's going to be in the lineup in game 6, but that's the problem, is that, St. Louis smells blood here. and they recognize that there are injured players on that Sharks team, and they're going for them, and they're going to knock them in the wall. And that's what you have to do in this game. It's like, if you smell
Yep.
a wounded player, you need to go after them and knock them out. It's a war of attrition in the play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey,
and that's what they should do. And the Blues are, I mean, I can't even imagine the intensity the Blues are going to come with, knowing where they've got San Jose right now when it's back in St. Louis. It's going to be wild in there. This franchise is going to sniff its first taste of the Stanley Cup final in how long?
1970.
1970, exactly. So it's going to be wild. Like, there's going to be a lot of pressure on them, but I think they're unstoppable at this point, at least for San Jose. And frankly, if you had to pick a series, you want a reasonably rested Blues versus the rested Bruins, because potentially the way those two teams are playing hockey, it could be massive fireworks for a Stanley Cup final.
Well, the one thing I saw out of the Blues, I mean, the commentary about them in their 4-line attack. I mean, that fourth line, which is Barbashev and Steen, and I can't remember who the third guy in the line is right now, but their fourth line has played really well. And you need a 4-line attack against the Bruins. And also, the Blues are not getting pushed around physically. They're actually pushing around San Jose. So I think that, in terms of matching up against Boston, who's going to try to impose their physical will on somebody, that might be a better match than a wounded San Jose Sharks team.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, sorry for being late, guys. Thanks very much. I'm going to be on for a little bit today, but I wanted to, this is definitely good to discuss. Got family stuff going on here, but everybody's calm right now. Anyway, I'm with you, Peter, too, on the whole idea of, I think the Blues Bruins is actually a really good Stanley Cup final. I think you're going to see. I think these teams will play each other very tough. They're very similar. Blues fans are so. The funny thing about Blues fans, I mean, this is the team that's been in the NHL the longest without winning a Stanley Cup. They've been everybody else that joined in '67 either has folded away or won a Stanley Cup.
Right.
So. This is the team that's been around the longest, and Blues fans are very aware of that, and they're very nervous about this whole Game 6. There's no question about that. This is not a given to them, even to get to the finals. I mean, 1970. How many Blues fans out there actually are, were even alive to remember them being in this in the Stanley Cup final? I mean,
they haven't been to a Stanley Cup final since they changed the playoff format, because remember, but from 68 to 70, it was all the expansion teams on one side and the original 6 on the other side.
Right.
And it was basically an elimination tournament between California, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Minnesota, St. Louis. So, yes, they got to the final, but I don't think they ever won it. I don't think they won a game in the 3 years they won the cup. They were in the cup final.
Yeah, I mean, they were really outmatched. I mean, like you said, they're going up against the original 6 teams, and at that point, and it wasn't like there was a really, really nice expansion draft for them. I mean, there was an expansion draft of sorts, but it wasn't anything like like what we've seen with Vegas and stuff like that.
Yeah, they had young spring chickens in goal. One was, I think, 41 years old, and Glenn Hall, and the other one was 40, and Jacques Plante.
They had exactly. 2 legendary guys, but both of which were way over their time. I mean, so I like the idea of the series. You can see where it's going. And it's funny because I was doing some research and I was trying to blog about this for maybe tomorrow or the next day. That there's a distinctive difference between the 4 rounds of the playoffs. So the first round of the playoffs to me is the round. Is the non-embarrassment round, right? This is the round you want to get through it. You don't want to lose the first round of the playoffs, because it's almost not quite, but it's almost as bad as making the playoffs. In some cases, it's worse if you lose the first round. It's just got that feeling of like, we didn't win a playoff round, and that's why we see so many upsets. That's why we see so many crazy things happen, because there is so much pressure on everybody to do that. There's so much intensity and pressure out there to make that happen. And then you survive the first round, and there's like a big sigh of relief, I think, because the second round of the playoffs is like usually where you see less upsets. You see more along the lines of like, okay, these are the normal things. These are the normal teams win. And And if you lose in this round, it sucks, but you didn't lose. It's not the worst thing in the world. But then this round of the playoffs, the third round of the playoffs, is where everything catches up to you. Like this is where the first, you can have a tough first round and battle somebody really hard and still get through the second round without it really affecting you. I don't think. Like I think that you can say, oh, whoever gets out of the first round is going to be is going to be dead because of a big playoff series, and I don't really think that's been the case in general.
Well,
but if you have two tough battles in the first and second round and get to this round of the playoffs, you are going to feel it, and that's what's happening with San Jose in a big way, right? This is like,
they won 7. They won 7 against Vegas and shouldn't have won probably because of the 5-minute major. Then won 7 against Colorado, and they had an opportunity to end that series earlier. They could have won in 6, but then they won 7 against them, and now they're in Game 6 against St. Louis. But look at what Boston did. Boston's toughest round was the first round. I mean, I picked Boston to beat Toronto, but Toronto put them to 7 games and then went 7, 6, and 4. And now they have a week off between the end of the conference, or over a week between the end of the conference final and the start of the Stanley Cup final. Now that might be good. It might be good in terms of, resting and healing. But it also, as we've seen in other series earlier in the playoffs, teams that sweep 4-0, they go out and they get swept the next round. So who knows if it'll be good or not.
Right. No, I totally agree. Got to get going, but I'm going to get this out really fast. So, and then the final thing I want to throw on that is the Stanley Cup final is once you're there, there's no longer the pressure of, getting there. And that is because a big part of hockey players is like, I want to keep playing as long as possible. And if you make the Stanley Cup finals, even if you lose, you're still playing as long as possible. Right. So there's like that kind of concept. The rumor I just wanted to get to really fast, which I wanted to touch base with, then I got to fly, unfortunately, is there's a rumor out there right now that PK Subban is very much in play with the Pittsburgh Penguins and with Phil Kessel going the other way. And it's been flying around for a little bit, but it seems like it's gaining a lot of momentum with some of my sources in Nashville, which is a big, my sources in Nashville are usually pretty good. Mm-hmm. I'm a little surprised by this, I have to admit, but at the same time, I think, there's been talk of Letang, there's been talk of Malkin as well. There's been talk of Kessel. But I think that, Kessel for PK sounds like a possibility. It sounds like the kind of shakeup that the Penguins might be interested in making. I'll let you guys talk on it. I really have to go, but I wanted to just touch base.
We'll jump in on that.
Thank you guys so much. And I will be back tomorrow full tilt, guys. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, Peter, I was going to bring this up because on the local Buffalo radio station this morning, they were talking about Kessel and we'll just reference the TSN trade bait list that we talked about a little bit last week because it's been brought up in other areas. And the hosts on Buffalo radio were talking about the feasibility of Kessel being traded to Buffalo because if the possibility of Jeff Skinner leaving via free agency happens, then Buffalo is going to be looking for scoring. And obviously Kessel is on the block in Pittsburgh. Like, it's no secret. He's number 1 on the trade bait list.
Yeah.
Now I've been the one who, when Russ is on the show and when Ack was on the show last week and we're talking about Subban and talking about Nashville, I said Subban is the natural to be traded because he's making $9 million. He's got a short term left in the contract. He's still at the top of his game. I'm sure there'll be a ton of teams lined up and interested in him. But I think Nashville wants to sign Roman Josi and not trade Roman Josi or let him walk at the expense of keeping Subban. So trading Subban makes sense. In the deal that Eck is rumoring, Kessel makes 6.8 the next 3 years. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that Subban's term is the same. He's at 9. So if that's the case, what do you think of that? Well, if that is a 1-for-1 or maybe a little bigger of a deal.
Well, Kessel, it's yeah. Oh man, this one's it's really hard to make sense of this. Because 3 years at 9 versus 3 years at 6.8.
Right. Maybe there's another player thrown in here
I don't like if you're trading Subban to make sure you have room to sign Josi. What kind of liability are you taking on with Yossi at age? When does he come up? He comes up. Okay. So after next season, at age,
I think he's 29.
At age 30 when he will sign his next contract.
Okay.
This is the thing I think GM's got to really sort of be careful of, because how many GMs want Vlasic's contract right now?
Not many.
Not many. Well, I'm not saying Yossi and Vlasic are the same player, but they're about to enter the same they're about to enter the same contract territory as Vlasic was when he signed his deal.
Mm-hmm.
And you better be darn certain that's what you want to handcuff yourself with, because that's what essentially you're doing. Because whatever you sign Yossi to, it's going to be difficult to get out of it if you're going in the same route as Vlasic. And Yossi, this is his last time to cash in. He's been grossly underpaid, so he's going for the money.
Right.
And, if David Poile can pull another contract rabbit out of his hat, as he has in the past, then God, it might be safe. But this is risky territory for Poile. And I'm not sure if you're improving your team anymore with Phil Kessel to get the contract space to sign Yossi by giving up Subban. I think Poile has done a magnificent job keeping that team, that franchise, that team in position once he got them into this level. But he's got a lot of balls in the air, and is acquiring Phil Kessel hopes that you're going to find some chemistry with Kyle Turris and get something out of that contract?
I will bet you anything, because it's been talked about the Turris is on the block as well. And now again, it's easier said than done. He's got 5 years left at $6 million. You're going to have to find somebody. Maybe it's a team that needs that cap hit to get to the cap floor, and is also looking for a center. So a team like the Islanders might make sense, because if they lose Andres Lee in free agency, $6 million is $6 million. I mean, if Nashville takes a little bit of a haircut off that deal, maybe it makes it more palatable. But this is the thing. I look at Nashville, and if they trade Subban, you still have Yossi, Ellis, Ekholm, and now Dante Fabro, who played at the end of the year last year, who's a really good prospect. I don't think they're worried about their defense. I think what they're worried about is the fact that they couldn't score in the playoffs enough to get out of the first round and beat Ben Bishop and beat Dallas. And I think that the Turris contract is a bit of a smelly deal, and if they can somehow jettison that, then they'll have the room to be able to take on Kessel and maybe make another move. I just think that maybe they go after Matt Duchene too. So there's going to be a lot of changeover in
and the other thing, and they've got Granlund for another year at 5.7. It's going to be really fascinating to see how they navigate this.
Now that's the other thing. Granlund's only under contract for one more year, so his contract doesn't kick in until the following year, so they can use some of the money from Granlund if they don't decide to sign him. Then you've got even more space.
Yeah, so Granlund, and who else comes off that after that year is Craig Smith too, and Dan Hamhuis. So there's between those three players, there's 11.2 million dollars that's off the books next year. But you still need roster spots. You still need players to do that role. And I think, given Granlund's age and stuff, I bet you Poile is going to try and make a move to keep him, because that was a good pickup for them.
Unless he was purely an extended rental, and then they just use him for this year, and then I'm sure like a team like Boston with Charlie Coyle, who they acquired, who had a year left in his contract, like Granlund did, they're going to want to re-sign him because he's been successful there. He's from the Boston area, and they'll get him at $3.1 million next year, and then probably give him a little bit of a raise going forward. But that, it's a similar situation with Pittsburgh. Honestly, their defense has not been good enough for years. They got through and won a Stanley Cup with Letang, and then when Letang was hurt, they had this blue line that was put together with spit and baling wire. Ron Hainsey on the top pairing, Olimata, like all these, like to Brian Dumoulin. It's like, okay, you won because Matt Murray and Fleury stood on their heads, and because Crosby and Malkin. With Crosby and Malkin aging, you need to improve that blue line. And I know, Phil Kessel has a limited shelf life. I'm sorry. It's like for all the Kessel supporters out there, the reason Toronto traded him was A, they were going through a rebuild, and B, he was not a disruptive force in the locker room. He's just sort of this idiot savant of hockey. And eventually, after a while, he just grates on his teammates. Now, supposedly they all love him, but they all love him, and he's now going to be on his fourth team. There's got to be something that's right.
Yeah. Look, I don't think anyone's going to come out and have bad things to say about Phil Kessel as a person. There's no one's ever we've really heard any sort of talk about him in a negative sense from other players or who he is as a person in the room.
Right.
But no one comes out and also speaks glowingly of him either. Right. I think Phil is just Phil. And I know someone who was close with his dad when the Leafs used to do a lot of father-son things in those sort of dark years, and they had expressed that it's a good thing Phil's not all like his dad, because then there'd be real problems. And I think that sort of explains what Phil is like. He's got a little bit of his dad, and his dad's not the most personable guy to be around, I've been told. And apples don't fall far from the trees. I don't think, and I'm not trying to slander Phil. I mean, I think he's got a sly sense of humor. I think he's an incredible hockey talent,
sure,
and stuff. But I think what he does with his game and who he is he's kind of like a hired gun. And teams should be hiring him for 3 years at $7 million and just rinse, wash, repeat when you need Phil Kessel, because he's that good. But you don't need him for every situation as your team goes through things. And Pittsburgh's probably done with him in that case.
Right. And I think they know that they need a change in somewhat of a change in chemistry. And, if it's not, I don't think they want to move Malkin unless Malkin wants to move. I don't think they can move Letang because Letang's injury history. Kessel's durable. He plays every game. He plays in the playoffs. He plays hurt. A team, and I always come back to this. I always come back to Arizona because Tocchet is there, who they labeled him as the Kessel whisperer in Pittsburgh. He was the assistant coach who had a direct line of communication to Kessel and knew how to talk to him. That's a team that needs scoring. And you tell me that Kessel would enjoy playing in Arizona where like nobody knows anything or nobody talks about anything. He'd be in heaven instead of playing in Toronto or playing in Pittsburgh or Boston, playing in Arizona where he could go golf in the morning and nobody would care.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, and the other thing is Phil Kessel. I mean, the other solution to Phil Kessel could be expansion draft next summer.
Yeah.
Right. Like if what's his? I'm looking it up right now.
Well, it's June of 2021 for the expansion draft.
2020. I thought it was 2020.
No, 2021.
See, I've got a
no, because I've had other people say the same thing.
Yeah, you're right.
It's 2021, so it's
2021. So then he's only got a year left. But if you can get and that's perfect for Arizona.
Yeah. And it's perfect for another team. If they acquire him, that would be the guy that they basically rent him for 2 years and then put him in the expansion draft, and there you go. So. Now, okay, I wanted to ask you on this because of the list of players on the trade bait list. Number 2 was Jacob Trouba.
Yeah, and
we've debated this for a while, but do you get the sense that the window that the odds of him being sort of an own rental for Winnipeg?
There's no way Kevin Cheveldayoff will go into this season with Jacob Trouba as a contract uncertainty to walk away for nothing or to be sold for pennies on the dollar at the deadline.
Okay.
There's no way. I've heard the term own rental. You don't do your own rentals for the next season. Mm-hmm. You may go in believing you can sign someone, extend them. You may have, because you have belief from previous contract talks that you've outlined where the issues are with the player and the agent. The one thing I think we all have to remember about Trouba's agent, which is Kurt Overhart, is Overhart has facilitated sign and trade deals and made his players made it, even though he's a hard ass, has made it so his players can move on, and he'll work to that. I think the hardest question is the Jets don't want to give up on Trouba. They don't want to lose him, and they know they can't trade for him back. So the push is to keep him, and has been to keep him for as long as he's been a Winnipeg Jet. And I think that the likelihood of that happening is over. So I think now the real work begins is what's the dollar value and who is willing to take that on for Jacob Trouba. And you have to get Kurt Overhart involved in that now.
Right.
That's probably where things stand.
So he's going to be a facilitator in the trade, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. My client, I'll sign my client to this. You want 8 years. We'll get the deal done. You're going to trade. You guys got to work. Like, he's going to help facilitate this. Where will he go? Because I think this is the one thing that is the $64,000 question with Jacob Trouba is it is certain he is wanted out. He has wanted other options. He just came off his career year in points. He needs to sign his deal this summer.
Yeah.
50 points.
And that 50 points complicates things, Peter, because if he hadn't scored that, if he had scored his normal, 30 points, 30 points, something like that, I think he'd be in the sort of $6.5 to $7 million range. But now with that aspect there, he's going to be asking for 8. He's going to be asking for 8.5. I don't know how many teams are paying that.
Well, that's it. And that how many teams and who's got the space for it, and is it a place he wants to be? That's the question. And I think this is where you have to get Overhart involved. And I think Jets fans and anyone else in the NHL who has an interest in Trouba have to recognize that it's highly unlikely that a team acquiring Jacob Trouba is giving up an equivalent asset like him back. It's going to be something different. And there may be a very highly touted prospect in the trade. There may be a very distinct forward in the trade, talent for talent with a prospect. But the idea that you're swapping defensive players for new scenery, it's not going to happen.
No, I mean, best case scenario for Cheveldayoff would be to get a young prospect. Say for example, because there's been speculation about Philadelphia. Say if it's Travis Sanheim, who's an RFA but doesn't have a big base to really ask for a ton of money. You get a starting somebody in your top 4 for maybe $2 million a year for the next 2 years on a bridge deal, rather than paying 8 or rather than the guy walking away. So that makes a lot more sense. It's not an even deal in terms of talent for talent, but it's a deal where you're going to be able to pay Connor or pay Line or pay somebody else because you moved Trouba and got that player.
And guess who comes up after next season for Kevin Cheveldayoff? Josh Morrissey. So he can find the cap space to do it all. It's the question of whether he should find the cap space to do it all and at what cost to do it. So Trouba is sort of my next thing up on my blog series as I try and do one a week while the quiet off season happens for Jets fans and sort of analyzing his situation. The rumor, there are a couple rumors out there. Well, there's a whole bunch of them. The ones I believe are plausible was that before what's his face was Holland was hired by Edmonton, there had been a fairly substantive belief that the Jets in Detroit have been talking, and the framework was around this year's first and a prospect. And the prospect people were talking about was Hronek. Now how you say his name?
Hronek.
Yeah. And I just don't believe that's what Holland or particularly now Yzerman is going to give up their top defensive prospect and this year's first to get Trouba. I just don't.
And their first is 6th overall, I believe.
Yeah, it's too much. But maybe the deal gets a little bit bigger because Detroit's got space and room, and the Jets need space. So it'll be really interesting to see as we inch toward the draft if anything develops, and what that means for Trouba and Overhart and how they look at things and what that means for Detroit. And with Yzerman sort of getting in there and sort of saying what's his mandate to do, what's he got to look at, and what he believes in. And if we go back and look at Tampa and where he was with that organization, is there any sort of clues of how he proceeded with Tampa that might give indication of what he would look at to do in Detroit? And I'm not sure about that. And that was part of what I was going at. I think what I just presented was high on price. And if I'm Detroit, I walk away from that 10 times out of 9, right? Like it's too much, but the Jets have other players. What can you do? Detroit needs to make some momentum. And I think Yzerman's going to be smart on it, but if you're going to make momentum, you better be damn sure you're getting not just a quality player, but something else that comes with it. And
yeah, but based on Yzerman and the way he operated in Tampa, there's no way he's trading his number one, especially a number one that high. I mean, and Russ would be more apt to talk about this because he knows this draft in and out. But I know that there's been talk about a Russian named Podkolzin who is at the top of this draft, but there's some teams that are wary of taking him in the first round or at least at the top part of the first round because he may be over in the KHL for a couple of years. I don't think Yzerman will hesitate. And the thing is that I think that he's got a couple years at least where he's playing with house money where Detroit can just build and build and build. And that's what he did in Tampa. So I think that that's the way they're going to go. I can't see, do they want to add Trouba, who's from Michigan? Sure. Their defense is terrible. But, and would Yzerman trade existing prospects already in the organization? Maybe, because they're not his. Maybe they trade Zadina, and I'm not starting a rumor here. Maybe they would be more willing to trade Zadina than they would to trade their first because this is his first, and that's Holland's first. So, let's see. A couple other things. I'm just touching back on that Buffalo situation. Them maybe going after Kessel. I don't know if that's a good fit. If I'm Buffalo, if Skinner leaves, I think you can spend your money wiser than trading and taking on Phil Kessel for 3 more years, especially in a division that, I don't know if it's good for him to play Toronto 4 times and Boston 4 times. It might be better for him in his career to go out west. He still has his skill. I think it's still he can still be effective. Eck reported this on Saturday as a rumor that he heard. William Nylander is going to be talked about all this summer.
He is,
and it's a question of whether Toronto wants to move him, doesn't want to move him, or has to move him. And I don't think they'll ever admit that they have to move him, but depending on what the progress of the Mitch Marner contract negotiations are, I don't think it's feasible to have 3 $10+ million players and then have another $7 million player with 5 more years left in his contract. It's going to be too much of a tight squeeze. He was talking about Minnesota being interested in him, and we know the direction that the Wild are going right now, Peter. Look at the 3 deals that they made. Donato for Coyle, more younger and more inexpensive. Granlund for Fiala, the same thing. Even the deal that didn't turn out well for them, Niederreiter for Rask. Rask was cheaper than Niederreiter, and I think he's younger than Niederreiter, so they went that direction. Nylander's 22, going on 23 years old. I think he's actually 23 now. The difference is that he's going to be paid $6.9 million, but if they're trading a defenseman like a Brodin or a Dumba in a deal, that's money for money. So I don't think that's a completely implausible possibility for the
league. I don't think so either. I mean, it's really hard to understand what direction the Minnesota Wild are going in right now. What they're trying to build, what they're trying to be. And this could be one of those things where if you're Kyle Dubas and there's a team that's trying to build something, you keep calling until they say yes in some way, right? If you that's your goal, because I if I'm a Wild fan, I'm probably very concerned with some of the moves that were made in the last year, particularly leading up to the trade deadline, what they're trying to do. And if you're a team that believes you need an elite talent, and there's a guy like Nylander out there who's available, you probably want to, you probably got a GM who's going to at least have enough curiosity in him that you got to work your sales job on it and be a little creative. And I think, I'm not sure what their cap situation is, but
Minnesota?
Yeah.
I'll check it as you're talking.
Yeah. I've got it right now, but I mean, Nylander at 6.8, to get Dumba back is at 6. I mean, that's the ideal thing. And Dubas may have to sweeten the pot a little bit, but I think he's got an asset or two he can sweeten that pot with.
Sure.
To get a Dumba. And Minnesota might just be crazy enough to try it.
Right.
Like, whether it works or not, but that's why I say they're worth calling, because I don't think you could sit there and you could line 10 of us up on a buzzcast and we'd all have 10 different views of what Minnesota's trying to build right now. Yeah, and that's probably an advantage for someone like Dubas.
Well, I look at Minnesota and their core group up front is old. Parise, Koivu, Stahl. I mean, Zucker's in his 20s, but there's been talk about them trading him too. So, if they perceive Nylander as a core player, as somebody who's 22, 23 years old, who's fast, who's offensive, he can play center, he can play the wing. If they perceive him as that, organizationally, they're still strong on defense, and that's where Toronto would need to get a player back for him. It's plausible. Now, the other thing that came out, and I haven't been able to find out whether it was Bob McKenzie mentioned this, but the name of Colin Miller has been on the Leaf radar for a little while. And if you look at the sort of circumstantial evidence, it does make sense. And I'll go through it quickly. He's a Sault Ste. Marie native. He played for the Greyhounds for 3 years while Kyle Dubas was there, so Dubas knows who he is. In 2017, when Russ and I were at the draft in Chicago before the expansion draft, there was tons of talk about the Leafs trading with the Bruins because the Bruins couldn't protect Colin Miller, about the Leafs trading for Colin Miller before he got claimed in the expansion draft. He had a 41-point year last year. They signed him to a 4-year contract. He didn't play all his games this year. There seemed to be a little bit of a falling out of favor there. And now Vegas, with all the signings and everything else, they're up against it, and they may be looking for cap relief. So this could be a deal where the Leafs trade a draft pick and get Miller, but the problem is they're going to have to move money out to bring him in, because that's the scenario they're in right now. But I think that would be a good ad for the Leafs.
Yeah, I think it would too. And actually, in fact, his name has popped up as someone the Jets should look at too, particularly because they're probably going to lose Myers. And they're going to lose Trouba in all likelihood. So now you're left with Buff and Pullman on your right D. You should be talking. But I mean, Vegas has now gone to over the salary. So their estimated salary expenditures for this coming season are $91 million.
Yeah. And
how fast did that happen?
Well, one of the things that's going to probably happen is because they have so many extra draft picks, team that's begging to get to the cap floor, they might sweeten and give them a second-round pick to take David Clarkson's contract off their hands. Yeah,
like Vegas has they have 2 extra third-round picks, 2 extra fifth-round picks, but they don't have a 6 or 7, but they got an extra second next year as well.
Yeah,
I'll
bet you would take the extra second for an Arizona or the Islanders or somebody like that to take Clarkson's deal on. And that
did they not? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, did they not trade their first this year to Ottawa?
No, they traded Brandstrom, who was their first.
So,
yeah,
it was just Brandstrom and someone else, right?
Yeah, I don't think they traded their first. I think they still have.
The first. So they may have to dangle that first out as well. If
it would be a lower first, it'd be in the high teens or low. High. So
it'll be interesting. Like McPhee and McCrimmon are going to have to really stick handle this carefully. Because you've taken on $16 million in salaries with Stone and Fleury. And, you've got Nate Schmidt at 5.9. You got Shea Theodore at 5.2. And then you've got McNabb, Holden, and Merrill all making a combined $6 million. So Miller's you're out, right?
Yeah, Miller's you're out. And the thing is that the guy that probably would have played in your top four next year at an entry level deal of $925,000 played for the Belleville Senators and probably starts for Ottawa next year in Brandstrom. So, you're not getting much. You'll get a player here or there that, like Cody Glass, if he makes it, but most of their guys are not making entry level contracts. So they're really heavily laden in terms of cap space. And you're right, it didn't take too long for them to get into cap jail. But they're not alone. There are a number of teams. I think it would be fascinating before we get to July just to look at a couple teams per show and look at the cap situation that they're in right now and how can they alleviate it.
So, you look at Vegas, right? RFA, William Karlsson, right? That's not even on their cap hit right now.
And
he's a UFA, Carpenter.
The qualifying offer on William Karlsson, I think, is over $6 million.
Yeah.
So they might have to trade him.
Yeah. I mean, they got Mark Stone. So they went all in. They didn't get through. But, you got to remember, they got a full season of Mark Stone. And that's a pretty good compensation for this, right? Like, so giving up on Karlsson could be totally fine for them. It'll be fascinating to see. It's a team that last year all we did was talk about them, right? And now we're sort of they went out in the first round. We haven't really thought about it other than the news of McCrimmon taking on the GM and McPhee just focusing up top. That's all we've really heard about them. But they've got a cap situation after 2 years in the league that they have to address. It's quite incredible to think about it, really, how fast they now have to play very carefully with their salary cap expenditures.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, it's like there are going to be teams out there. I mean, like I just mentioned about Vegas trading Clarkson. The Leafs, they're talking about maybe having to trade Nathan Horton's contract because, they can put it on an LTIR, but if they can trade it, then it clears. Either way, they can clear the space, but it's easier just to trade it and maybe give up an asset to move out the money when it was basically not causing them any problems the last few years. But other teams are going to be like that too. I mean, Ryan Callahan may have to be traded from Tampa Bay because they pay Braden Point. There's going to be scenarios like that. And the thing is, they're going to run out of teams that are going to say, oh, sure, I'll take that. Or the price is going to go up for those players with those teams because now now there's more than one team that's saying, oh, will you take on my bad money? Oh, yeah, but the price has gone up.
Yeah.
So
no, exactly. And then you got to, here's another team we were talking about, it just got me thinking, we haven't really talked about Vegas. Who else we haven't talked about? Who has to address their goaltending and they may have to trade to get someone is Calgary. And they're not in dire cap situation and they got Frolik coming off next year and other things, but they've got, next year after this year, they're free from Hamonic, Brody and Michael Stone, as well as Frolik. They've got some space coming up next year, but they need some of those guys to win and they have no goaltending. I mean, they may be active. Like, as we've said before leading up to this, now that we're really almost at the Stanley Cup final, I expect that we're going to hear some more news coming out of teams and things like that as things kind of come to the end with this playing. But I think also we're sort of forgetting how many possibilities of movement and activity could happen. Because when teams like Calgary, who in theory should have moved beyond the first round, when teams like Tampa fail, and their cap situation, you have Vegas who has to make moves, Toronto who's going to have to start addressing something.
Yeah,
the Jets who have to, there's a lot of fun things that can really be talked about, and it's going to start taking off soon. I think there's your hype for the audience, right? Like, stay tuned because it is going to get wild. And
I think we'll start doing that in the next couple of days, because it's all the news is going to be the final, but we have to start looking toward, we'll let Russ talk about the draft, but we have to look at maybe a couple teams a day. We'll look at their situations, where they are, where their needs are, where they could go, because cap wise or talent wise, a lot of moves have to be made to, and I think that there's going to be a willingness because there were so many favored teams that fell out early that they're going to say, screw this, we're going to shake things up because we failed. We thought we were a Stanley Cup contender and we lost in the first round to Columbus or Carolina. And now we may have to shake things up just to see where things go. So,
yeah.
All right. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Eklund, for Peter Tessier, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.